Look, we spend a massive amount of time in our culture obsessing over getting rich, but there is a huge, almost completely invisible difference between looking rich and actually building wealth. In this explainer, we're dissecting the anatomy of a decision, an unglamorous 15-year decision that fundamentally changes the math of your entire life. We're going to explore the gritty, psychological reality of building invisible wealth, step by step, paycheck by paycheck.
To really grasp this, I want you to drop yourself right into this scene. It's 6:58 on a Thursday morning. You're standing at pump 4 of a Marathon gas station on Route 9, just watching the numbers on the pump tick up. You're driving a gray Honda Civic with 161,000 miles on it, complete with a ticking sound and a check engine light that's been glowing for 11 straight months. Right behind you, a coworker named Marcus pulls in. He's driving a jacked-up Silverado with chrome exhaust tips. It's loud, it's pristine, and it absolutely turns heads. Marcus gives you a wave, and you wave back. Now, Marcus has a highly visible $687 a month drug payment. You, on the other hand, standing next to your beat-up Civic, have a completely invisible brokerage account that just crossed $164,000 last week. And nobody at that gas station has a clue, not even Marcus. You've done the math sitting at red lights. You know you could easily afford his truck. But the thing is, this isn't about being frugal anymore. It's about what happens when you just no longer need people to know you have money.
Section 1. The gas station contradiction. Section 2. Starting with $50. Let's flash back 3 years earlier. You're 24 years old, living in a cramped 480 square foot apartment that runs you $875 a month. You're literally sleeping on a mattress on the floor. After rent, car insurance, and the rest of your bills, you look at your checking account and you've got exactly $214 to survive the next 11 days. You are just exhausted. Exhausted from doing mental grocery store math, literally putting the $4.19 good bread back on the shelf so you can afford the $2.49 loaf, just surviving. Then you have a phone call with your dad, where he mentions that things in life never really settle down. And right then, you make a choice. On your lunch break, in about 11 minutes, you open a total market index fund. You fund it with $50 you were actually supposed to use for a haircut, and honestly, there's no dramatic movie music playing. Your apartment doesn't magically look better, but the next week you do it again. Then you get a $3,100 raise at work. And instead of upgrading your life, you do the most boring, predictable thing imaginable. You increase your automated contribution by the exact amount of that raise, bumping it from $75 to $125 a paycheck. You never even let that money touch your checking account. Meanwhile, your buddy Marcus gets a similar raise, and what does he do? He goes straight out and leases a brand new Tundra. But over time, quietly, without any fanfare, your account crosses $18,700. Right around this time, you have this interaction at work. There's a 60-year-old veteran in the accounts payable department named Denise. You're both just waiting for the office printer, and she glances down at your Civic's key fob hanging off your belt loop. She casually says, the car doesn't know what your net worth is. Neither does anyone else unless you tell them. It doesn't even feel like profound advice in the moment, It just feels like small talk. But it turns out to be this piece of quiet, incredible wisdom that takes years to fully understand and internalize. Section 3. The 100K Temptation Test. So, by age 29, this completely mundane habit has really snowballed. You check your investing app one Sunday morning and boom, your account just crossed the $100,000 mark. You expect to feel this enormous sense of triumph, but honestly, you just feel slightly more awake. And almost immediately, the universe decides to test you. The market drops 9% over inflation fears, instantly wiping out thousands of dollars on paper in just a few days. And right in the middle of the stressful dip, the transmission on your old Civic starts making this absolutely terrifying grinding noise on cold mornings. So here you are, back in a parking lot, staring at your phone, faced with a massive temptation. A friend of a friend is selling a clean, low-mileage 2021 Toyota Tacoma for $34,000. You sit there and run the numbers. Finance at a reasonable rate, it'd be about $610 a month. You're making a $71,000 salary now, you can easily afford it. The bank would approve it in a heartbeat. Your parents wouldn't judge you. It is a completely defensible, normal American decision. So, do you buy the truck? You don't. And here is exactly why. You do one more calculation, almost by accident. You realize that if you took that $610 monthly payment and invested it at historical long-run averages over the next 15 years, it yields roughly $180,000. Boom. That is the gut punch of compound interest. Sure, it's not a perfectly guaranteed linear line, but just seeing the shape of that math is enough to make you stop dead in your tracks. You keep the Civic, you take it to the mechanic, bracing for the worst, and it turns out to just be a $340 sensor. It wasn't the transmission at all. You're incredibly relieved, but you also realize something huge. The hardest part of this journey wasn't reaching $100,000. The hardest part was choosing, once again, not to change your lifestyle. Section 4. When money works harder. Fast forward a bit to age 32. You're sitting at the same kitchen table, maybe in a slightly bigger apartment now, and you hit a critical turning point. The fundamental nature of your wealth actually shifts. You sit down and do the math one Tuesday night. Your automated contributions out of your paycheck that year totaled $8,840, but the portfolio's growth that year? $31,600. Think about that. The money made almost 4 times what you put into it. It's like your money has become a second engine. For years, you were the only engine, dragging this account uphill all by yourself. Now there are 2 engines working, and the beautiful thing about that second engine, it never gets tired, it never sits in commuter traffic, and it never has to answer a single work email. And because of that second engine, your daily life starts to feel totally different. Back at age 24, a dead $1,650 water heater was an absolute world-ending crisis. It required swiping a credit card, setting up a payment plan, and a solid week of sheer panic. Now, at age 32, it requires a mild transfer of funds from an app and an annoyed phone call to a local plumber. It literally downgrades from a life-altering emergency to a mere inconvenience that comes with a receipt. Meanwhile, you run into an old acquaintance, Tyler. Tyler sells real estate, he drives a leased Range Rover, and man, he looks like the absolute picture of success. But after a few beers at a neighborhood cookout, he quietly confesses to you that a slow quarter almost caused him to miss his lease payment. Just picture that. 2 people standing at the exact same cookout on completely different financial ground, and nobody there can tell who is actually secure. Section 5. The quiet cost of wealth. By age 34 and then 36, the portfolio clears $412,000 and eventually scales right past $700,000. But this introduces a totally new phase of the journey. It brings this very specific kind of quiet distance from the people around you, because the flexes of real wealth become completely invisible to the outside world. For instance, your manager comes to you and offers a $9,200 promotion. Great, right? But it requires giving up 2 Saturdays a month. You turn it down. Why? Because your portfolio is generating $24,000 a year entirely on its own. Your time is literally worth more than the raise now. Or when your girlfriend Priya gets her hours cut at the clinic, you just quietly absorb the lost income. No panic, no stress. You're even able to anonymously help an old college friend who hit a rough patch. And all the while, Marcus, who's still at the same company, just driving an even bigger, flashier truck now, is constantly wondering how you always seem so incredibly relaxed about money.
This whole experience forces you to completely redefine the word freedom. Freedom isn't some flashy car reveal on social media. It's not posting perfectly curated photos from an expensive beach vacation just to prove to everyone you made it. Freedom is a random Tuesday where a bad month at work doesn't become a household crisis. It's having a hard boundary that lets you dictate your own life, regardless of what your bank balance used to dictate for you.
But look, I have to be honest with you. There is a cost to this. It can be incredibly lonely because the math underneath your life literally stops matching the math of your peers. You realize you can no longer openly talk about money with friends who are struggling because your numbers just sound impossible and out of touch to them. You realize that Denise from Accounts Payable was dead right. True wealth happens on ordinary Sundays lying in bed before your alarm goes off with absolutely zero applause. You find yourself standing just slightly outside the conversations you used to be fully inside of.
Section 6. True wealth is invisible. Which brings our story full circle. We're back to the present day, standing right back at Pump 4 on Route 9. Gas is definitely more expensive now. The Civic is a little louder, and yeah, maybe it's a little more embarrassing to certain people, but your financial anxiety, it is completely, permanently gone. And what this really boils down to is this core thesis. Wealth wasn't a sudden, massive luxury purchase. It wasn't a lucky lottery ticket. It was a 15-year habit of $50 repeated automatically over and over until the math of your life fundamentally changed. Now, that invisible portfolio is worth more than most of the physical houses on the street you grew up on. The choice to be wealthy rather than to just look wealthy turned out to be completely invisible.
So as you finally pull out of that gas station in that loud, rattling gray Civic, heading off to a job you no longer technically even need, you carry a number in your head that would shock everyone who has ever made a quiet assumption about you. But you never correct them. You just let them assume. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. If you were standing in that parking lot, 29 years old, with $100,000 in the bank, facing the heavy pressure of society and the intense temptation of looking successful to everyone else, Would you have bought the shiny truck, or would you have kept the Civic?